This is the sermon for June 29th, 2025. Today's passage is found in 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 1 through 14. When the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind, Elijah and Elijah were on their way from Gilgal. Elijah said to Elijah, "Stay here, the Lord has sent me to Bethel." But Elijah said, "As surely as the Lord lives, as you live, I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel. The company of the prophets at Bethel came out to Elisha and asked, "Do you know that the Lord is going to take your master from you today?" "Yes, I know," Elisha said, "but I do not speak of it." Then Elijah said to him, "Stay here, Elijah. The Lord has sent me to Jericho." And he replied, "As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." So they went to Jericho. The company of the prophets at Jericho went up to Elijah and asked him, "Do you know that the Lord is going to take your master from you today?" "Yes, I know," he replied, "but do not speak of it." Then Elijah said to him, "Stay here, the Lord has sent me to the Jordan." And he replied, "As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." So the two of them walked on. 50 men of the company of the prophets went and stood at a distance facing the place where Elijah and Elisha had stopped at the Jordan. Elijah took his cloak, rolled it up, and struck the water with it. The water divided to the right and to the left, and the two of them crossed over on dry ground. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken from you?" "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit," Elisha replied. "You have asked a difficult thing," Elijah said. "Yet, if you see me when I am taken from you, it will be yours, otherwise not." As they were walking along and talking together, suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared and separated them, and Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elijah saw this and cried out, "My father, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel!" And Elijah saw him no more. Then he took hold of his own clothes and he tore them apart. He picked up the cloak that had fallen from Elijah, and he went back and he stood on the bank of the Jordan. Then he took the cloak that had fallen from him and struck the water with it. "Where now is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" he asked. When he struck the water, it divided to the right and to the left, and he crossed over. This is the word of God for the people of God. Today's message is called River Crossing. In May of 1862, General George McClellan landed a large, very large amphibious force on the Yorktown Peninsula. His goal was to advance up the peninsula between the York and the James Rivers towards Richmond. General McClellan was known for being overly cautious. He always overestimated the Confederate forces and their size, and he was often met with many delays. One of those challenges involved crossing a river, the Chickahominy River. General George Custer was on his staff and was eager to impress his superior officer, so he dashed out on horseback into the middle of the river and shouted back at the astonished officers, "That's how deep it is, General." Well, today we have a very important river crossing. Last week we ended our text in 1 Kings 19, verse 15, with the prophet Elijah being renewed in his commitment to the Lord and given a new set of responsibilities. Well, one of those responsibilities was to anoint a new prophet to take his place. In verse 19, of that, it says, Elijah went and found Elisha plowing with 12 yoke of oxen. Elijah went up to him and threw his cloak around Elisha. Elisha left his oxen and ran after Elijah. He said, "Let me kiss my parents goodbye, and then I will come with you." "Go back," Elijah replied. "What have I done to you?" So Elijah went back. He took his yoke of oxen and he slaughtered them. He burned the plowing equipment to cook the meat, and he gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he set out to follow Elijah and became his servant. As his servant, Elijah was a loyal servant to Elijah. Elijah, has refused to leave his mentor's side as they are making this last journey. It will be a journey of remembrance. They start at Gilgal. It was at Gilgal where Joshua led the people of Israel to spend their very first night in the Holy Land. It was there that they set up the tabernacle and they observed the very first Passover in the Holy Land. From there, Elijah and Elisha traveled down to Bethel. Bethel means house of God, and it was at Bethel where Abraham built an altar and he worshiped God. While there, Elijah and Elisha were met by the school of prophets. Next was Jericho, the place where the Israelites had entered the promised land and had won a victory. Once again, another school of prophets tells Elisha that Elijah is about to leave. Finally, they arrive at the Jordan River, a place of such major significance for the people of Israel. The Jordan River was the dividing line between their old life and the wilderness, 40 years of wilderness wanderings, and their new life of freedom and obedience to God. This is a spiritual journey for the two of them, the mentor and the student. Elisha is committed to walking every step with his friend and teacher. This will be a farewell journey for Elijah to remember how God has been faithful to him and to the people of Israel. It's a different kind of journey for Elisha, for he will soon be walking it alone. They are now at the river, the Jordan River. Joshua and the people of Israel had crossed it almost 600 years before, a place so full of meaning and promise. The Jordan River, although a real river, is also a metaphorical idea, a place in the consciousness of people. Elijah is about to take a journey unlike what anyone else has ever done. He will leave this world without experiencing a physical death. Once again, he is about to meet God. It reminds me somewhat of the song "On Jordan's Stormy Banks." On Jordan's stormy banks I stand and I cast a wishful eye. And then in the 4th verse it says, "When shall I reach that happy place? I'll be forever blessed, for I shall see my Father's face, and in his bosom rest. I am bound for the promised land. I am bound for the promised land." Or how about these lyrics from a bluegrass song by the Steel Drivers? "I'm an old man now, bound for glory. Time to lay these burdens down. I've had enough of this old world of worry. Gonna trade my troubles for a crown." And then in the 3rd verse, "I've got one last thing to do, one more mile before I'm through. Casting off these earthly chains, going where there's no more pain." And then in the chorus, I'm going to jump to this part. "And wade through muddy waters one last time, and in my dreams I come out clean when I reach the other side." Well, Elijah has just one last thing to do. He's got a river crossing with his friend Elisha. His student is standing right beside him, ready to cross the river with him. The river crossing is significant. The two of them have walked a great distance, but now they face the Jordan, and Elijah allowed Elijah to go just a little further on his journey. Taking his cloak, he struck the water, and together they walked over on dry ground. Jordan's stormy banks has given way to the calmness of waters being held back for the final journey. And when they crossed over, Elijah asked Elisha, "What can I do for you before I am taken from you?" Elijah said, "Let me have a double portion of your spirit." Let me have a double portion of your spirit. Now, this was a difficult request. The Hebrew people had inheritance laws, and at this time it stood like this. The oldest son got one share for being a son and a second share for being the oldest. Well, there were at least 50 men standing on the other side of the river who could have inherited a portion of Elijah's spirit, and there were others in the schools of prophets. Elijah said, "If you see me when I am taken from you, it will be yours." Now, the Hebrew understanding of a prophet is that they had an ability to hear Yahweh and Yahweh's deliberation inside the divine throne room. In other words, they could hear God. That explains what happens next, because as they were walking and talking together, suddenly a chariot of fire and horses appeared and separated the two of them, and Elijah went up into heaven in a whirlwind. Elijah saw it all, and he cried out, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel." And Elijah saw him no more. When Elijah was taken, Elisha was alone. He was not only alone, he was lonely. His mentor and his friend was gone. He was in anguish. He tore his clothes because of the pain that he was feeling. And he was alone on the other side of the river, separated from home, from family, from friends, from other prophets. Now, he has to cross over again. My uncle and I once crossed a creek. It was a creek that we had crossed many times. In other words, it held a pretty good and important significance for us because it was where we had grown up. We were older now, and this time we were crossing it on a little hunting trip. But throughout the day it rained, and the creek rose. And as we returned, I stepped off into the water only to discover that it was now too swift to cross. Only with the help of my uncle was I able to get out of the water. Now Elisha stood on the bank alone, and he needed to cross to the other side of the Jordan. How will he cross it? How will he make the journey alone? Will the waters be too swift? But something had happened when Elijah was taken into heaven. His cloak had fallen from him. The cloak, the very symbol of prophetic ministry. A way in which people everywhere recognized a prophet was through their cloak, and it was now laying on the ground. And Elijah needs to return to the other side. He needs to return to a prophetic ministry, so he takes up Elijah's cloak, which is now his. He rolled it and he struck the water with it. Elijah said, "Where now is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" While it is true God has been with Elijah, there is now no doubt God is with Elisha. A double portion of the Spirit is now with Elisha. You will now wear the prophetic garment, Elisha. You will not be Elijah, but you will have God's Spirit upon you nonetheless. And with that action, the waters parted and Elisha crossed over on dry land. Elijah will now be the chief prophet in the land. The waters will sometimes be swift and deep, but God has equipped Elisha for the task. How about us? How about us? Transitions can be difficult. We can ask God to help us avoid them, but trials will come, and they will come, and they will come. And transitions have to take place, and growth always needs to occur. I once told my father in a phone conversation that I no longer had a mentor, and he told me that it was now time for me to mentor others. The church that I just went to pastor had a pastor there who served for many, many years, and he and his wife did a great deal for the church and for the community. But now it's time for us to pick up the cloak. It's also time for the church to experience, hopefully, a new generation of people taking up a cloak of ministry. Here's the good news. We never make the journey alone. The Spirit is on all of us, and we are making the river crossing together. And so today I close with this benediction. We know that in this life we cross many waters, and some are deep, some are swift, and sometimes it may seem as if we are going to have to cross them all alone. We believe that you, Heavenly Father, have prepared your people for what lies ahead, and so may a double portion of your Spirit be with us as we endeavor to do your will in the world. And so with that, I close today, and I hope to see you here again next week in the mountains.